Hello everyone, and welcome to my slop era of content. Today I'm going to be making a tier list of most of the creepypastas and internet horror stories that I've read. I say it's slop, it's probably not slop content, but I've had people ask me to do this before, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting and like a good way to reminisce on so many of these stories. My channel's been monetized for a little bit over a year now, and I started doing this full time about a year now, so I thought it'd be fun to go through some of these and see my thoughts on them. As you can see, we've got S tier down through F tier. I didn't make an E tier, mostly because there's no E rank on Sonic Adventure 2, which is the standard we all go by. Just so you guys know, in my mind, like C is average, and then, D is not very good. F obviously is bad. S is like, perfect, and there'll be like maybe one or two up there, and then A and B, are really good stories, but we'll see. I'm gonna try to be a little bit more critical on these, but also it's gonna be hard to rank some of these that are more funny, because it's like, I do enjoy a lot of funny stories like Jeff the Killer, but obviously they're not written very well. So I think I'll go mostly based on my enjoyment, but we'll see. It'll all be arbitrary, as all these videos always are. So thank you all for watching. I hope I don't break too many of your guys' hearts here. I think it'd be fun to do a little behind the curtains on my actual thoughts on some of these. And like I said, these are mostly the stories that I've covered in their own videos. Like, I've done a dedicated video about them. There's a couple that come from kind of videos that have been split up, or like videos that had multiple stories inside of them. But for the most part, that's just going to be the ones that I covered on their own videos. So there are going to be stories in here that are missing. So if you guys want to know my rankings on those, I would say comment them and I'll respond to you, but I probably won't do that because I don't really read all the comments on my videos, because it would probably make me go insane. But you could guess where I would rank them based on my general rankings here. These are in no particular order. It's just I was looking at my YouTube channel to see which videos I did. So let's start off with Abandoned by Disney. Now, Abandoned by Disney is a pretty good story, I think. I don't think it's like the best creepypasta. I think there seems to be a contingent of people online that think that Abandoned by Disney is like the best creepypasta. I guess warning, there'll be a lot of hot takes in this video, but I think Abandoned by Disney is pretty good, but like I said, I don't really love the Mickey Mouse pulling his head off. Somebody made a really good comment on the video, though, that I made about it, where they said, like, the inflection and the way it should have been written is that Mickey Mouse, instead of just saying, "Want to see my head come off?" says, "Want to see my head come off?" Because you already see a skeleton missing its skull, I think, so that would have been a lot better. We're like 2 minutes in, I've already done a terrible Mickey Mouse impression, so I guess bear with me for the rest of this video. So Abandoned by Disney, I think we're going to put it in the B tier. Hopefully this tier list maker works. I have never used this before. I just thought, we just need a text-based tier list. So Abandoned by Disney, I'm putting in the B tier. Again, it's a pretty good story. I don't think it's obviously in like an S tier creepypasta. I don't think it's one of the best I've ever read, but I do think it's pretty good. I have not read the later entries in the story. I know they give some more like backstory to the photo negative Mickey Mouse. And I should say the part of the Abandoned by Disney story that I really love is like the beginning where it talks about these like old abandoned Disney projects. I think that's really interesting and brings us into like a cool kind of alternate universe, and it all feels very believable, obviously, until photo negative Mickey rips off his mucusy head. So that's how most things go. Okay, next we have Blue Meteor, which is the Incel Venom story that I covered recently. It's just sent to me by just like a fan. Me drinking lots of water throughout this video, so get ready for that. But this was sent to me by a fan over Instagram who was just like, "You need to check this out. It's insane." And they were right. It is completely insane. Blue Meteor, Incel Venom is an easy F tier. I think, well, it's hard to say because I do think this story is funny, but I think it's poorly written, and the messaging behind it is also very flawed and not something that I agree with in the slightest. So if you have not watched my video on the Incel Venom story, it's insane. It's about a guy who essentially becomes Venom, like he gets the symbiote on him and becomes Venom. And then that also ushers in like the Christian rapture. And so like, and the point of it is that like, if you become a Venom, then you were like chosen by God, and all the unbelievers don't get to become Venom. It's insane. The top comment on that video that I made, it was really funny. It was like somebody was wrestling with like their homoerotic Venom fantasies and had to write an entire story to justify why God would smile upon this behavior. So Insanely funny comment, funnier than anything that was in that story. The true tragedy of the Blue Meteor story is that most of it's actually just very boring. It's just the person describing what it feels like to have your body forcibly changed into Venom, but they're just describing the same thing over and over and over again. They talk about their bones getting squishy, their bones liquefying. Somebody asked me if that was a Danny Gonzalez reference. It was. I'm a huge Danny Gonzalez fan, so that's why I said that. So anyway, Blue Meteor is an F tier. Next up, Mr. Widemouth. I just recently covered this story. I think I might have covered it when I did a Creepypasta iceberg video way back in the day. And by way back in the day, I mean like 8 months ago. But I really like Mr. Widemouth. I think I'm going to put this one up in the A tier. Sorry, Mr. Widemouth, you might be going in the B tier, actually. Yeah, I do think I think this is about a fair ranking. I wasn't sure if I was going to do left to right ranking as well, but I think I will. So Mr. Widemouth, again, I think it's a very solid story. That's why it's in the B tier. I like how it's short. It doesn't overstay its welcome like a lot of these stories do. And I think the kind of twist at the end, and I guess spoilers for all these, but the twist at the end where you find out that the kid was, like Mr. Widemouth, essentially was going to lead this kid to a graveyard, but didn't, and he has this line where he's like, I've taken lots of people to this place, but I'm not going to show you because you're not ready yet. I think that's legitimately very creepy. The only thing I question with Mr. Widemouth is I don't know if the actual entity, like the Furby looking thing that's always holding a comically large butcher knife, is I think that is maybe a little too strange for me, or I just don't know if that design works for me necessarily. But again, I think it's a very solid story. I think it's well written, which again is hard to come by when it comes to creepypastas. And so for being a classic creepypasta, I think this one is almost underrated, because I know when I first was thinking about it, I definitely lumped it in with Jeff the Killer and some of these other, Eyeless Jack and some of these other bad ones, or ones that are less good, I should say. But no, Mr. Widemouth's a very solid story. I like that story. Next up, we have Ticci Toby. Goodness. Ticci Toby, I think Ticci Toby's either going in C tier or D tier. I think honestly, I might change this. It might be rude, but I think Ticci Toby's got to go in the D tier. Mostly because, again, I think this one, it's not funny bad enough for its own good. I think if there was more kind of insane stuff that happened, it would be a lot better. But it's honestly, kind of the story itself, besides being stalked by Slender Man, which they don't really lean into a whole bunch. I think the story itself isn't super exciting. It doesn't have a lot going on. There are some funny moments in it. I like the dad asking for a hug. That was one of the running gags I put in that video, is the dad being one of the "where's my hug" guys that you knew back in high school. But so there are some funny parts in it, but I don't think Ticci Toby is nearly interesting enough of a character. There's that part of the end where he grabs his rusty hatchet and his brand new hatchet, and that's supposed to be his iconic character trait, but I think it just suffers from the fact that Ticci Toby's supposed to be an anti-hero kind of character, and I just think the person that wrote it didn't have the chops to make a really interesting anti-hero character, and I think that's a really hard trope to write about, and so I think it's just a lot more boring than something like Jeff the Killer, but it is funny in certain ways, so I do enjoy it in that sense, but I think D tier is a safe spot for it. Again, I don't think none of these stories am I saying are terrible except for Blue Meteor. I think it's cool that people wrote these, and it's awesome that Ticci Toby has a big fan base about them, but I would just see no reason to go back and read that story versus something like Jeff the Killer, which I would go back and read because it's hilarious. I just don't find Ticci Toby funny enough. Next up, we have Happy Appy. Oh, Happy Appy. Happy Appy, I think, is the story. It's the second most important story in the history of my channel. I think I owe most of my success to Jeff the Killer, because my Jeff the Killer video is my most viewed video. And Happy Appy is what I think a lot of people know me for. It was funny to see Creepcast read this. I would say that I know they wanted to get out of the way. I think they might have made a mistake by reading the whole thing in one episode, because if I had tried to do that, I would have died. And I think it's hard to be entertaining over that long when the story is as rote and monotonous as this one, especially after the first 10%. So I think, I'm glad that I split this up into 4 parts. I didn't really do that intentionally. I just, after I was writing the first part of the story, I was like, I literally cannot put up with this anymore. I have to, I have to split this up for my own sanity. So Happy Appy, I think we'll put in the D tier. Maybe, no, not better than Ticci Toby. Happy Appy's biggest issue, and it's hard to really say it's an issue because it feels intentional, is that the story is so needlessly long. It's just insane, and like that was obviously the intention of the author. It's kind of a really big inside joke, but it wears itself thin. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like there are some jokes where they're just kind of like the same thing over and over again. They hit you over the head. I'm thinking of like a Mr. Show skit where a guy is like describing his vacation, or like climbing the Swiss Alps or something, and he keeps breaking this like cabinet full of priceless china. It happens like 5 times in the skit, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's funny when it first happens, and then it pisses you off, but then it wraps around to being funny because it just keeps happening, and the sheer absurdity of it happening that much like makes you laugh again. The issue with Happy Appys, I don't think it ever wraps around from pissing me off. I don't think it ever gets like that much funnier again. And again, they hype you up so much with the 9/11 imagery at the beginning, and they never really reclaim that high. So I think that's another issue with it. So Happy Appy in the D tier. I think that feels fair. I think that's where I would, I think it's my tier list, and I think that's where I'm going to put Happy Appy. I may have to go through this a little bit faster because this video is already 11 minutes long, and I have to leave. We're driving to Seattle tonight, so I want to make sure I get this uploaded before we go there. Okay, next up we have Serial Killer Grandpa. I think this one is like, the real name of the story is like, I think my grandfather might be a serial killer. This is a no-sleep story about a guy who suspects that his grandpa might be a serial killer. It goes in some crazy directions. It becomes almost like they're hunting a strange Jack the Ripper-esque killer that ends up being in like an alien type creature. That's also like a skinwalker that can impersonate other people. It's interesting, but I think I would put it in the C tier, which again for me is just like average. That doesn't mean it's a bad story, but didn't really stick with me a whole ton when I read it. I think, pretty well written for no sleep stuff. I just personally didn't love like kind of the superhero-esque direction that it goes in. Also, somebody pointed this out in a comment that I saw where they were like, at the end of the story, it basically ends up that the guy's grandfather is like essentially this superhero who was hunting the skinwalker-esque serial killer, and then he invites his buddy to do surgery on him to get like this alien parasite out of him, but the buddy sells him out because he's trying to like help his daughter, who is involved in a cult this story's insane, is involved in a cult that is supporting this creature. And so the main character like injects himself with the entity to become a crazy, super strong superhero, super soldier-esque entity, and then he like brutally murders the guy's daughter and the guy. I think he like lights him on fire. So it's like maybe the justice there isn't necessarily, it's not proportional potentially. And then there's never like a moment where it feels like this is an intentional part of the story where the guy is like becoming this bloodthirsty monster because he became one of these creatures. It's never really resolved. It just ends in kind of like a, his dad, he rescues his grandpa, and his grandpa ends up being fine. He's like, oh, you salty dog, you became a serial killer hunter just like I did. Like, it ends too, I think, happily for me, but I'm also just a sucker for a sad ending. All right, next up we have Sonic.exe Round 2. This one is an easy F tier. It's better than Blue Meteor, but goodness, is this a terrible story. I think kind of infinitely worse than Sonic.exe, like the original story, because Sonic.exe is really funny and has kind of interesting moments in it where it's just describing this game. Sonic.exe Round 2 has way less of the actual game, which is like the interesting part to me, and is more of like just this kind of boring investigation. It has a very half-baked plot about a cult, because all these stories have plots about cults, but yeah, very half-baked plot about a cult revolving around Sonic.exe. It is funny that this reveals that like the program of Sonic.exe is like some ancient evil entity that is, I guess, decided to disguise itself as a Sonic the Hedgehog fan game, because why wouldn't you? But yeah, just a very boring story. It ends kind of like in a very dull way as well. I did not really like that story at all. Okay, next up we have Ted the Caver. This is going to be an interesting one. For me, Ted the Caver, I think I'm going to put in the A tier. And a lot of you guys might be asking, Davis, why are you not putting it in the S tier? You literally called it a peak creepypasta. You measure so many creepypastas against Ted the Caver. And in my mind, Ted the Caver is like right on the line of being an S tier creepypasta. It might even be a low S tier. Maybe at the end of this video, I'll redo some of these. But my biggest issue with Ted the Caver is not the very ending, because I think the ending is perfect, where it like leaves you on a cliffhanger, and the way that it's done through the medium of the story, where it's like this online blog that's being updated, and because you don't get a last update and the last post is like, hey, I'm gonna update you guys tomorrow, you know, everything will be fine, and then you get nothing else. Like, I think that's a perfect way to end the story. What I dislike is the second to last entry has a lot of like the main character, Ted, if you didn't know that was his name, describing like these hallucinations that he's having, and it very much leans into like this paranormal thing. And I wish that it was maybe a bit more ambiguous, especially because they verify, like he goes to his buddy and his buddy's like, I've been seeing the exact same visions too. And I think that kind of cheapens the story just a little bit. I wish it was a bit more ambiguous. You guys will know that I love ambiguity in my stories. Goodness, sorry, I just ate and I'm burping. That's embarrassing. But anyway, I just think the way that Ted the Caver was going, and because of how grounded it feels, I wish it was a little bit more left up to your imagination. I don't dislike paranormal stories. You'll see that later on. But again, I think Ted the Caver works so well because it's so grounded, and I just think like it goes a little bit overboard with like the hallucinations and the things that he's supposedly seeing. So that's why I put it in the A tier. Again, a very solid story. I think any internet story would be lucky to be Ted the Caver, but it's not perfect, and because of that, it's got to go in the A tier. But, you know, very few stories are perfect. Okay, left-right game. This one's also going in the A tier. Yeah, A tier. Not as good as Ted the Caver for me. I really enjoy the left-right game. It's a pretty long story, but I think every part of it is pretty dang interesting. I think the characters, for the most part, are pretty endearing. The main character for me is like definitely just like, you know, supposed to be an audience insert blank slate character for the most part. And I think that works out pretty well. I tend to, in the stories that I really like reading, I tend to actually enjoy protagonists that have like a lot of personality with them. I made a video about a book called My Heart is a Chainsaw a while back by Stephen Graham Jones. And something that I love about Stephen Graham Jones writing in general is a lot of his protagonists are like very distinct characters, which I find quite interesting. I'm reading a book right now called Ghost Story by Peter Straub. It's pretty good, but again, the characters it's following are like, they don't seem to have super distinct characteristics, and that can kind of bother me. Although the writing of the book itself is really, really good. It feels very classic to me. But anyway, left-right game I think is really good. This was a cool experience making that video because the author of the story actually reached out to me over email and was super complimentary of the video that I made. And they pointed out, because at the end of the video, if you don't know the end of left-right game, it's essentially like this weird game they're playing where they just take a left turn and then right turn, and then it transports you to like these weird scenarios you're making it through. And at the end, pretty much everybody dies except for the main character, who ends up finding out that kind of at the end of this road, they reached like this Rubicon they cross, and it was essentially like this future version of themselves that's become like omnipotent is bringing them to this point so they can, you know, eventually ascend to whatever their destiny was to become this, you know, this all-powerful being. And like this being had showed up in the past and like put all these events in motion. And something that I point out in the story is my reading of it is like almost that this omnipotent, insane, all-powerful being that is the main character is not acting necessarily like entirely altruistically, and like all the people that were on the path that were in this convoy did die in the service of this thing ensuring its own existence. So I read it as kind of a more sinister view. And the person that wrote the story said they really liked that reading of it and that I did a really good job kind of putting that together. And so that was, there's been a couple times where authors have reached out to me and said they liked my analysis, or they've confirmed things that I've speculated on, which is always a very gratifying experience. But the Left Right game especially was a really awesome video to make. It's my longest video. I think it's like 5 hours long. It took a long time to make, but not as long as you'd think. I think it took me like maybe 2 weeks to put together, and I don't think I released anything in the meantime as before I was doing unscripted content, so I was only doing scripted stuff. But it was like a crazy time during our lives. My pet bird Charlie, who was the first pet I ever had, very sweet bird, he died while I was making it, so there's a lot of emotions going on during that story, but a really good story. I'm going on a tangent now. So definitely A tier feels right to me. Again, not S tier because I don't think it's perfect. I think especially there's like a reporter, journalist character in the story that I think goes a little too crazy without much like warning or build up. I almost think the story would have been interesting if it was like half from our main character's perspective and half from the direct perspective of that journalist character to see what was necessarily going on inside their mind. But again, a very solid story. I really like it. Okay, 1999, another longer creepypasta. This one for me is going in the B tier. It's going to be a high B tier. About a cool, spooky old TV show that somebody's like talking about how they watched and it was scary. I think it's called like Mr. Bear's Cave or something, Mr. Bear's Basement. A good story. It has it's one of those ones that was like updated periodically, and you could tell the person that was writing it was getting very busy or like was kind of losing steam, and so they didn't update super frequently. My biggest issue with the story is that like it feels like half the story is the guy apologizing for not updating very frequently, which again would make sense when you're reading it as it's coming out, but now it just feels like a lot of it's unnecessary. There's like kind of a scandal about this story, or like some drama controversy around it, because there are portions of it that have now been removed. Those portions I didn't read. I think I might have touched on them in the video, that were supposedly plagiarized from Alan Resnick's YouTube channel. If you don't know who Alan Resnick is, I think he made Alan Tutorial, which is a really cool internet horror series, kind of an OG internet horror series. And he's made some stuff for Adult Swim. I don't know if he's necessarily the one that works on things like This House Has People in It, which I do want to make a video about because I love those Adult Swim videos. But anyway, 1999 apparently plagiarized those. The guy who wrote 1999 said that those aspects of the story were not originally in the story. It was only when it was uploaded to creepypasta.com did somebody insert those without his permission. It's not entirely sure whether that's true, or that it seems to be, information on either side to support either claim. But I do think that it makes the story flow the flow of the story is not as good when those missing portions aren't in there. So it's a really weird situation, but I do think the story itself is really solid. I think the Mr. Bear character is creepy. There's a really good moment where it's like, because Mr. Bear is this character who like had this creepy public access TV show and was like luring kids to sacrifice them seemingly to like the devil, which is maybe that's a bit of a tired trope, but I don't know, I kind of love devil sacrifice stories. I think they're interesting. I think it's like, I don't know, that has always interested me. So definitely, I think a well-written story. There's a reason it's kind of stuck around in the public consciousness so much. And again, for being something that's a little bit older and something that could be kind of boring or cringy, I think it's very well written. So high B tier feels fair to me. Okay, next up we have a Wild Party. This is an SCP. I put my SCPs on here as well. I usually love SCPs. This one I think I'm going to put in C tier next to Serial Killer Grandpa. This one kind of suffers from the fact that it wants to be part of the wider kind of class of 76 mythos, which we'll talk about later. But it's not super long, and I don't find like the exploration log if they send this like criminal in there to go inside this house. And I think the thing is like every year at the same time, the house goes crazy. Like there's like, it feels like there's a party inside. And the exploration log is cool because the guy goes in there and he essentially starts hallucinating or seeing things from this party. And you kind of put together that like there was, something terrible that happened there. And then he ends up killing himself by like jumping into a pool of, I don't know, I can't remember what's inside the pool, if it was goo or something, or if he just like broke his neck by jumping into an empty pool. But it's pretty well written and has eerie vibes, but again, just not quite up to like that gold standard of SCP that I tend to look for. I think this also suffers from the fact that I like SCP. I don't read a whole ton of SCP. I only read ones that seem very interesting to me or are from like that similar class of 76 canon. So in terms of those, it would be like a C tier for me. But again, I still think it's a solid story. That's why it's in C tier. Sonic.exe. This, I think I'll put it in the D tier, below Ticci Toby, above Happy Appy. Again, a very funny story. And I think it benefits from it. I don't think it gets very boring in terms of like a story just being funny. Like if we were grading these on like how funny the story is, Sonic.exe would be like an A tier because I think it's really funny. I love like the way that Tom, the narrator, has so much concern for like the characters in the game. Like he's like, oh, why is Knuckles so sad? Like that, and like that's like the most heartbreaking thing to him. I made a post about this, but I just barely like a couple weeks ago, like not 100% in, but I got all 180 emblems in Sonic Adventure 2, which I had never done before. And I will probably never do again because it was kind of a miserable experience. But I just have so much nostalgia for that Sonic game in particular. It was my favorite game when I was a kid, and I never got all 180 emblems. But Sonic is just such a funny, like, it's such a funny series to me. I've been watching a lot of like Cybershell videos lately, and I watched LS Mark's video about him S ranking. I think I watched like an Alpha Rad video, and some other guy who played through all of like Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. But that series is so funny to me because I think, and people are gonna hate this, I think objectively I don't think Sonic Adventure and especially Sonic Adventure 2 are very good games. I think they're very janky. They're incredibly frustrating. There are times when I was just like absolutely furious at the games because they were just not working properly, but there's so much nostalgia about them. But again, I just think they're maybe a little bit overhyped in the minds of people that played them when they were kids. There's YouTube I really like called Loot. He's kind of a smaller YouTuber. He's not that small, but he makes some really great videos. He made a video about Star Fox Assault, which is a game that I played a lot as a kid that I really loved and like nobody talks about. But he made a video on Sonic Adventure 2 that's pretty good, but he definitely refers to it as like one of the greatest games ever made, and I just think that's patently absurd. I think it's like, it's probably one of the greatest Sonic games ever made, but I guess 3D Sonic games, but it's not a very high bar to clear. But I should clarify that I do have fun playing Sonic Adventure 2. Just going through the story, I think it's fun, but I've gone on way too big of a rant. Sonic.exe, funny story, not very well written, and apparently the guy that wrote it is a creep, but I feel like that's kind of par for the course in a lot of fandoms. So yeah, D tier feels fair to me. Okay, next we have My Dad Finally Told Me What Happened That Day. This one's going in C tier. I'd say below A Wild Party. This is really one that feels like it did not know where it was going, and the ending of it is just kind of like, oh, it turns out it was just a crazy guy who dresses like a woman, so he must be insane, which is like kind of a problematic trope. Sorry if somebody doesn't like me saying that, but I just think that's kind of a dumb trope to use. And then like they're also really good at impersonating people's voices. I just think this one did not know where to end, and it just kind of meanders a lot in the meantime. There are some legitimately creepy moments, like when he finds this creepy dude who is just like silent, like dancing in a room by himself, which I would be curious to know if this was written after the Smiling Man story that I read for a recent video, because if it's just copying that, then it's obviously less impressive, but that's probably kind of an older trope as well. But yeah, this one just really didn't hit for me. I was really excited when I started reading it, but I just think it does what a lot of other stories do, but it doesn't do that thing particularly well. And a lot of it is just like, I'm trying to get information from my dad, or I got him really drunk this time off of, I think it's like bourbon. It's like the same thing he gets him drunk off of every time. He's like, I brought him more bourbon, so he finally told me part of what happened. And then it's like, his dad's very cagey about it. Then he's like, oh, I got more information from my dad. And then I did hypnotherapy, and I found out that all this crazy stuff happened to me that I didn't remember about. So it's like, I don't know. Again, just feels like it meanders a lot and didn't know where it wanted to go. And so I think for that, it's a C tier. But again, I think an enjoyable read. I was never like bored while reading through it, which I think is good. Like it had me strung along the entire time. I just didn't like where it ended. But I also don't think a bad ending should like, you know, condemn a story to the F tier. Okay, Tommy Taffy I have next. It's really hard to rank Tommy Taffy. There are 4 Tommy Taffy stories and then a book. I think if I were to average out all of Tommy Taffy, it would be in the D tier. Like if I were to rank the Tommy Taffy novel in terms of novels I've read, that is like a low D tier for me. If I were to pick only the first Tommy Taffy story, probably be a C tier story, because I don't think the writing is particularly well done. But also, and this is maybe going to be controversial, and maybe this is because I don't have kids, but I don't think this one is as like needlessly shocking as a lot of people make it out to be. I just think like it is terrible, and Tommy Taffy does some friggin' he like sexually abuses children, which is like the worst possible thing that could happen. But I think some people act like it's like the most gratuitous, terrible thing that's ever written in that story. I don't think the way it's written is like, you know, I don't think it's written in a way that feels necessarily super gratuitous to me. Like the author wasn't necessarily trying to be 100% edgy. I think they maybe just, they overdid it a little bit. So I think the original Tommy Taffy story, I get like a little bit, I defend a little bit because I don't think it's just trying to be 100% for shock value, especially if you try to like tie it into themes of like systemic abuse and the way that especially like sexual abuse can pass down through generations if it's not properly handled and if people don't properly address it. I do think with those themes, it's like not the worst story you'll ever read. And again, I just think it's strange that people think it's like the most terrible, offensive thing they've ever read, but then like they read something like Borrasca and they're like, oh, that was, you know, horrifying, but really well done. And I'm like, I think the gulf between how Tommy Taffy and Borrasca handle sexual violence is a lot smaller than a lot of people think. So that's probably gonna be my hottest take for this video. But anyway, Tommy Taffy, let's put you in the low C tier. Is Tommy Taffy a tier better than Ticci Toby? Is it maybe high D or D tier? But again, that's the average of all the stories, because I do think stories 2, 3, and 4 are not good. I think they just get worse and worse. And then maybe 3 is better than 4 if 4 is better than 3 if I'm remembering correctly. And the novel I don't think is very good at all. I think it just stretches it out very long. I kind of get the sense from the author though, Elias Witherow, that like maybe he's not in love with Tommy Taffy nobody should be in love with Tommy Taffy, but he's not like in love with that character, but it's like his most popular one. So it kind of feels like he needs to write a novel about it. But I guess it's cool that he wrote a novel based off his internet story, but I think high D tier, maybe I'll move it up to the low C tier actually. That feels maybe a bit more fair to me. Maybe I'm being too mean to Ticci Toby anyway, but I don't want to go back. Okay, next up we have Homicidal Liu. This is a D tier story. Sorry, like incredibly forgettable to me. Not worse than Appy, but not as funny as Sonic.exe. Just so forgettable. The only memorable thing I remember about this story is that he talks about being in a joke of a correctional facility, which has become kind of a running gag, like something that I talk about, I make jokes about on this channel. So I'm glad I got that out of this. But yeah, I just think, and also kind of boring to just write a story that's like, Jeff the Killer is a crazy kid who kills people, and now his younger brother is also a crazy kid who kills people. Like, you know, props to whoever wrote it, because again, they were probably young. But yeah, just like not remarkable enough from me. Like not like something like the Jane the Killer story that I read had a lot of like weirdness in it that I think makes it endearing. I didn't find any of that with Homicidal Liu, so I think D tier. Notice we're kind of bottom half heavy in this tier list so far, which can't be a good sign. The House on Hadley Hill, another another SCP. This one, you know, about a spooky door where there's an old lady who says she needs help, and you stick a hand through, and she bites off your hand, I think. Or if you do what she says, you, I could be getting so many of these wrong, but it's like if you do what she says, she ends up, you get, I think it's like a hand grows on you or something, starts growing like on your body, which is really creepy, like a skeletal hand. And depending on how nice you were to her is where the position of the hand goes. I think it's like you lose your hand regardless. And depending on how nice you were to the spooky lady, that hand grows in a more favorable position. So if you're really nice, like you'll get your own creepy skeletal hand where your hand used to be. But like if you're terrible to her, it'll like start growing on your brain and just kill you. So a really cool idea, but probably a C tier story for me. Better than a Wild Party. But again, just kind of short. And you know, I just think my bar is higher for SCP because some of my favorite internet stories ever are SCPs, but still well written. And again, props to whoever wrote it. Again, C tier is just like average. And I guess like in terms of average for an internet story is good to me. Like I think it's easy to make an internet story that's bad, but to make an average internet story, like feels like it's average in all the things that I've read, including a lot of the novels I've read. So I'd say it's pretty good. Next up, we have Squidward's suicide. Slight rant about this because somebody asked me about it. Somebody said that they were glad that I don't censor the word suicide in my videos, and they were like, even though it probably hurts your monetization. I've never once been demonetized on this channel, even though I've talked about some risque-ish things. So I don't think, and maybe I'll eat my words after this, but I don't think saying the word suicide demonetizes your video at all. Maybe if you're like making a bunch of jokes about it, it would. So like, I don't know. I have this thing about like, I don't like when people use substitute words like sewer slide, because I think it's just, if you're trying to be serious, if you're like making a jokey video, then like I kind of get using terms like that because like you're not being serious. Like it's not like Papa Meat does it, but like if I'm watching a video that's supposed to be serious, or like they're talking about like an actual true crime case and they won't say words like kill or murder or suicide, or like abuse, then and they like bleep it out, that to me feels a little strange. I mean, no shade to them. Maybe they know their channels a lot better than I do. Maybe they will get demonetized if they use that. But anyway, if you want a good example of a way that's not respectful of talking about suicide, look no further than Squidward's suicide, which is gonna be a D tier story for me. Definitely worse than Sonic.exe, but better than Homicidal Liu. Not nearly as funny as Sonic.exe. Oh wait. Not nearly as funny as Sonic.exe, but does have some funny moments in it. Like the entire premise is funny. Like the idea that Squidward is just like hopelessly depressed, because I think it's like people made fun of him at his like clarinet concert or something. It's just so ridiculous. But it did spawn the scary Squidward image, which I do think is actually a pretty good image. It doesn't scare me, but like if somebody were to make a video about Squidward's suicide, like this would be an actual tape, I think that's what it would look like. I do think like the worst part of the story is like the one frame images of like a serial killer who is murdering children, because it feels like it's just thrown in there for no reason. That actually does feel gratuitous to me, but especially in the context of a cursed SpongeBob videotape. But it's also interesting, one thing that is I do kind of find a little bit interesting about this story is like it feels like it's halfway between wanting to be actually cursed, because they talk about how like the sound coming through the speakers feels so realistic. I guess just great audio engineering. But then like it wants to feel more grounded in that like it's really scary because like it's just a serial killer who made this rather than like it being actually haunted. So kind of a weird middle ground in there that, you know, I feel like you got to commit one way or the other. Okay, next up we have Jane the Killer. Jane the Killer is definitely a C tier. Probably above Tommy Taffy. Because Jane the Killer is one of these ones that I think is very endearing. I love, like, again, it feels like a younger person wrote this, like, you know, maybe somebody who was in high school or maybe early in college. But this story has a lot of personality to it, which I think is fun. Like, Jane the Killer, one, works at an IHOP, which I just think is funny. And then, like, I think her parents are killed by Jeff the Killer, if I'm remembering correctly. And she has, like, a younger sister that she cares for, and a girlfriend that doesn't get mentioned till the very end. So Jane the Killer is a lesbian icon. But she also does like a government procedure because she has very healthy blood. That's right. She has like perfect blood, which they keep talking about. And then she ends up getting injected with liquid hate. Like her blood is replaced with liquid hate and she becomes like a supercharged serial killer only bent on killing Jeff the Killer, which if you're gonna write a Jeff the Killer like anti-hero character, this is the way to do it, not like Homicidal Liu. I can't remember Homicidal Liu's an anti-hero. Or I guess not like Ticci Toby, who's kind of in that same vein. Jane the Killer, I think, has so much personality. It's so fun. I say all this as I put in the C tier, but come on, B tier is for stuff that's like actually really well written, But yeah, very fun story. You know, I have fond memories of Jane the Killer. Gives me the warm fuzzies inside. Next up, we have the Russian sleep experiment. Number 13, Russian sleep experiment. No, Russian sleep experiment. Okay, this is gonna be controversial because this is either C or D tier for me. I think I gotta go C tier just because of how iconic it is. C tier is getting so crowded. I'm sorry, guys. I'm on the fence too much. Probably. Yeah, maybe better than Jane the Killer. Russian Sleep Experiment is a strange one because it's so iconic, especially that iconic image that comes with it. And it's so many people have fond memories of it. This is just one that does not hold up to me at all when going back to it. I think if I would have read it, like if I really loved this one when I was younger, I think I'd have more fond memories about it, but I don't really have that nostalgia attached to it. So I think this one's, it's got pacing issues. I think it goes on longer than it really should. Like when they open the room for the first time is when I thought it was going to end, but they like seal the people back in. There's also just like, you know, a bunch of logical issues with the story, which is like kind of dumb to critique. I think my video on this one was maybe a little bit too harsh. I was coming right off of the Jeff the Killer video, and this one was like, I think one of my more controversial videos of, you know, all things considered. So I do think the story is like, it's for being iconic. I like that element of it, but I think it wants to present itself as realistic. And I think a lot of people think that it's real, which if you read the whole thing, it's obviously not realistic. Also, I think it's like, it's funny that they're without sleep for like, it's like 10 days. It's not a very long time. It's like people have definitely survived longer without sleep than this. Also, I pointed out, this is so pedantic, but would definitely be a Soviet sleep experiment and not a Russian sleep experiment. But, you know, that's just me being pedantic, like I said. And the monologue at the end, I do think is like one of the cringiest things I've read in a creepypasta. It's just way too flowery, which is such a hard word to say. And I intentionally took that out of a lot of my scripts because I couldn't say that word. But yeah, C tier I think feels good for me. You know, it's a good story. It's just not, you know, well, not a good story. What way I should say it is I think it's a bad story, but I think it is iconic for a reason, if that makes sense, and so I'll put it in C tier. Next up, the Dionaea House. This one, definitely A tier. This feels like, I think I like this more than the left-right game, mostly because I love you'll find this out about the way that I think about stories. I love the like framing device of it and the way that it's formatted, which is like a big thing for me when reading a horror story. I love this one is just like an email chain between two people. Even though it doesn't end in like the most satisfying way, I do think the mystery it sets up is super fascinating. I love all the different logs you get. Voice crack. You get like the one where it's like a girl who's like doing this blog about how she's babysitting at this family's house that ends up being the Dionaea house, and it's really fascinating. And the way it's written is done really well too. It feels very realistic. There's also like a chat log between two women who one of them lives in the house and one of them is like just like her neighborhood friend or something. Again, it feels very realistic and grounded. There's like newspaper articles from this. I just think this story is really well done. Maybe it's better than, it's weird. Like it's right. Ted the Caver, I think like the central mystery of it is very fascinating, and I do love the way it's written, and especially the visual element to Ted the Caver I think is really awesome. But the Dionaea House I do think is like a better written story. But I think to me, Ted the Caver is so iconic and was so important in my love of creepypasta and internet horror that I kind of have to put it higher, versus Dionaea House is something I didn't read till later on. But Dionaea House, incredibly well written, super interesting. Yeah, really great story. Next up, Smile Dog. Smile Dog, I think I'm gonna put it in B tier underneath Mr. Widemouth. This is one that's interesting because the picture does not scare me in any of its forms. I think that hurts it a little bit. I do love the way that, sorry, the garbage truck right outside my house, if you guys can hear that. I do think the reveal at the end that like this person is telling us this long story to spread the word of the creepy smile dog image is really well done. It feels like one of the first stories that I read that had that kind of, that angle to it, where it's like making the audience play along with the mythos of the story, which I always think is really fascinating. My biggest issues with Smile Dog is like the way that it's written. I talked about this in the video that I made about it. Like, it's so overly written. Like, it feels like it's trying to be way too fancy. I was reading something lately where it was like a story that, like, somebody was saying maybe Smile Dog was trying to emulate a particular voice and style that came from like another early internet horror story, and like maybe that excuses some of the writing that I felt was like a little bit too much. But again, that was my biggest issue with it. But I think the story itself is like fascinating and a really cool internet urban legend. And even though the picture itself like doesn't scare me, I do think it's really fascinating. I think Blame It On George recently made a video where he talks about like the origins of that image, and Blame It On George is out there doing the Lord's work. He's finding the origins of really like iconic internet images, and like talking about like the Backyardigans original pilot episode and stuff. I truly find his videos incredibly fascinating. I think his stuff's really awesome. I've been watching him for years. So go check out that video if you haven't, or if you don't watch Blame It On George and you're interested in like lost media, he's like the best person on the internet that's covering that, in my opinion. Next up, sorry, that garbage truck's really loud because we filled my garbage can was like full of like a shelf that I took apart. So that's why it's banging around in there. Looks like they're leaving. Okay. Anansi's Goatman story. This is where we're gonna start filling up the B tier. Also B tier, better than Smile Dog. I'd say maybe below Mr. Widemouth. These two go back and forth with me because I think Anansi's Goatman story has so much personality to it, and like the way it's written is really interesting. Some people think it's like excessive where the guy, and this is funny because I don't really swear in my videos, and so I took out like a lot of the swear words, but I do think like the way it's written is like, people say it's like excessive and just like how much the guy is just swearing, but I don't think it's like, I don't know. I don't think it's that excessive, maybe a little bit over the top, but for being like an original 4chan green text story, I mentioned this before, I've never once been on 4chan. I don't know really anything about it besides what I've seen, and like there's a channel called MYLP who covers like 4chan stuff. Another great channel, by the way. He's covered some really funny, like insane things that happen on, I think he covers like the Something Awful forums, which again, thing I don't know much about, but anyway, Anansi's Goatman story, really cool, genuinely creepy, a cool mystery of like, this kind of skinwalker or like the thing where it's like you're in a cabin with some people and you don't know which one of them is like this creepy thing. I think the ending is really haunting, where it's like this thing is with the group and then ends up leaving at the very end because it gets found out. Like, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. I wonder if somebody's turned this into like a short film or something. I think it would do really well as that, because it is, again, genuinely creepy. And I do think the formatting of it works really well and makes it feel like, maybe the story would feel more generic if it wasn't formatted in the way it does, but I think because it's written the way it is, with just like this aggressively informal writing style, I think that's helped it stay in people's minds. So again, really cool story. Next up, we have this thing, A Quiet Madness made, which is an SCP. This is, sorry, my mouse wasn't working there. This is my first S tier. This is like probably my favorite piece of internet horror ever, which, there are people who don't like this story. This is an SCP about a creepy high school where strange, bizarre things are happening. I actually have 2 videos on this, but one of them is essentially a remake of the earlier video. So there's like, I made a video on this a while back, which at the time was one of my best performing videos, one of my favorite videos as well. This is, again, it's an SCP about this high school where there is some entity that is like, essentially they found underneath the school. They essentially found like a weird stone copy of the school underneath this school. And it's essentially all these anomalous things are happening, like emerging from this point underneath the school, if that makes any sense. And it just is describing all these things. There's like this strange, horrifying, childlike creature that people see. Somebody says he sees it underneath the pool. Like at one point the school lifts off the ground and you can see this thing underneath it. There's a really great moment where it says that at 9:30 a.m. every single person in the school hears this entity just say hello in their right ear. And then there's a whole another subplot where you have these cheerleaders who were, the cheerleaders for the school, and it seems like they've gone missing. One of them in particular, had some bad things happen to her, and is connected to this strange entity out of the school. And these cheerleaders become like these hanging bodies that people see floating around. And there's just so much genuinely creepy imagery in here. And I think it's just the absolute gold standard of like writing an internet horror story that leaves so much up to the imagination, but gives you enough that you can put something together. Again, just absolutely S tier. I think it's really incredible. That author, DJ Cactus, has commented on some of my videos. I just think this is absolutely genius. If I were to ever become, have a super successful YouTube channel where I had, that Markiplier money and could make my own movie on anything, and DJ Cactus allowed it, I would 100% make this thing A Quiet Madness made into like some sort of found footage mockumentary style movie. I just think it is like one of the coolest works of internet horror. I think it is the perfect encapsulation of why quiet horror works so well, and you get everything about it just feels so unique and distinct. So I love this story. If you haven't seen my video on it, go watch it. Again, one of my favorite videos I've made. And to transition from this, we have The Fear of Darkness, which is the terrible fake Ted the Caver sequel. I do need to talk more about this because I think I was maybe a bit too rude to this one. So there's some weird history with this where The Fear of Darkness is a sequel to Ted the Caver, and there was like an article that was written about it where it mentions that this has a copyright symbol on it, like a trademark symbol that the author wrote on it that says it was written before Ted the Caver. So it seems like they were trying to steal Ted the Caver as a story and say that Ted the Caver was just a remake of their own original story. Part of me wonders if that's not actually true. Like if this person was not trying to steal Ted the Caver's thunder, but instead thought that the trademark date or the copyright date or whatever should have been their own birth year. And that's why instead of them trying to take credit for this story, they're actually just crediting their own birth year instead. And they're like in high school when they wrote this. So I don't know if there was actual malice behind The Fear of Darkness as a story. That being said, this is an easy F tier. Probably worse than, nothing's as bad as Blue Meteor, but definitely worse than Sonic.exe Round 2. Just for the sense that it's not really original, and then it tries to take Ted the Caver and turn it into like this weird, like paranormal. I mean, Ted the Caver was going in a paranormal direction, but they find like a ghost shaman, and like the entity inside of the cave is like a Native American. It's like somebody who has a very tenuous grasp on Native American culture, tried to write a story about it, and then also stole Ted the Caver. And like the first part of the story, the worst part is that the first part of the story is just a very boring retelling of Ted the Caver that is significantly worse. So you have to slog through all of that to get to the stuff that should be interesting at the end that's not really interesting at all. So yeah, terrible story. But I would say I don't know if they're necessarily trying to directly steal Ted the Caver from the author. I don't know if they were trying to steal credit. It could have been a case of just like somebody misunderstanding when you put like a copyright or a trademark date on something. So I do think I was maybe a little bit too mean to it in that sense. But either way, it's not a well-written story. This next one, I can't remember what the name of the story was. The Jeff the Killer story written by Jeff the Killer, which was a story where it was like, the first part is like a police officer talking about how they're finding videos. It's like an internet horror video where Jeff the Killer comes out of the screen and kills you. Like, goodness, voice crack again. If you guys don't know, I spend like all my day at home and I don't have any friends. Oh my goodness, besides my wife. So I don't really talk a lot during the day. So my voice just dies whenever I'm recording something long like this. Usually I cut those voice cracks out. But I can't do that because I'm recording this all in one giant video that very few people will probably watch because it's very rambling, but I thought it'd be fun to make this. But anyway, the highlight of this story is at the very end, where Jeff the Killer hijacks the story and is like, "You stupid cops can't find me. I'm gonna kill everybody who read this story." So writing from the perspective of Jeff the Killer is very funny. And the idea that Jeff the Killer goes from just being like a crazy serial killer to an entity that comes through your computer screen, or like at least finds out where you're living by a computer screen video and then kills you, is like pretty funny to me. So this is like, I'm gonna put this in a D tier down here. These are kind of the more forgettable ones, but better than Ticci Toby, because I think this one's is funny in a lot of ways. So I guess not in a lot of ways, funny in a couple of ways. So Jeff the Killer, a story about Jeff the Killer, I think D tier feels a good spot for that. Not well written, but has some funny moments to it. Next up we have Candle Cove. Candle Cove, I'm gonna put this in low A tier for now. Could also be a high B tier. A great story that does not overstay its welcome. A really cool, like, you know, distillation or encapsulation of lost media creepypastas, and I think A tier is actually a fair spot for it, because I do think a twist at the end where you find out that this show that all these people remember that was like kind of creepy was not a real show, and they were all just watching like static on the screen, so it has this cool paranormal aspect to it. I think that is really cool. The guy who made this, who I believe is named Chris Straub, went on to make the Local 58 analog horror series, which is like amazing, and one of the main pioneers of analog horror, which is a genre that I really love. That like it's maybe a little bit oversaturated now, but I just think it's cool that it's like horror on a smaller scale that individual people can make, which I think is really cool. Now it's just like, because of people making AI slop analog horror series, it's kind of ruined some of that genre. But I think analog horror is very important to the horror landscape. I just love stuff that, you know, these things that individuals make and like put together these entire series, I always think is incredibly impressive. So I think Local 58 has a lot to do with that. I think Candle Cove feels like a good stepping stone to that style of storytelling that was told through Local 58. And again, just like a really solid story. Not a ton going on, but there doesn't need to be a ton going on, and perfectly mysterious and creepy. So yeah, definitely an A tier for me, up with the big boys up here. Next up we have The Real Chuck E. Cheese. Okay, this is interesting. It's funny because like D tier for me is just becoming like stories that aren't well written but are funny, which is like maybe a fair place to put those. If so, let's go in the top of D tier, because this one, just like the idea behind it, and of like the fact that Chuck E. Cheese for some reason is creating a mutant beast version of their mascot, and then the fact that a character says like, "You can't kill that thing, it's a beast version of our mascot," is the absolute funniest thing. So easily high D tier. The funniest so far, I think, of the bad creepypastas. Maybe Sonic.exe is funnier. I love real Chuck E. Cheese, especially because I have so much Chuck E. Cheese nostalgia. I loved Chuck E. Cheese when I was a kid. Like everybody else, I was a huge fan of it. And yeah, I love that his name is Charles Entertainment Cheese. I also had a gag in this video that I liked. I might be talking too much about my videos. Like, I don't want to make it seem like I'm super full of myself, but I made like a lot of To Kill a Mockingbird references in this video, and To Kill a Mockingbird's my favorite book, so I have like positive nostalgia for that. I also recorded this in my parents' house when I was out of town, which is kind of funny. And I think this was the second video I ever made that was sponsored. I made it in like, I think I literally made it in like a single day, because I was out of town and playing the Slay the Spire board game all day with my friends and my brother, and I was like, frick, I have to get this video out really quick, so I made it very quickly. The Puppetmaster's Regime. Definitely, this one's tough, because I think the first part of it is really good, but the second and third parts are not good. I was maybe too generous in this one. C tier for me. Yeah, this feels like a good spot for it. I'd say better than the Russian Sleep Experiment, just because I think the first part of the Puppetmaster's regime is legitimately really good and creepy, but the issue is that, like, the second part is thankfully short. It's just, like, I talked about this a lot in my video. I disliked how the first part was, like, this really cool, interesting, creepy, lost media story, but it was about a stage play, which is really cool. And the second and third part were so much of it was, like, this is really just scary because the guy that made it was a pedophile. And, like, yeah, obviously that's a terrible thing, but it just made the horror more ordinary in a way that I don't like. I do like when horror feels ordinary, but this was, like, the issue with it was that it was so not grounded at the beginning. And so I feel like they either tried to retroactively ground it by just having it be like a pedophile story, or they just thought they could make it be about a pedophile, and that would be the scariest thing you could possibly write about, which, again, is a terrible thing, but it's not a cheat code to making your story scary, so you gotta put in more effort than that. But the first part of the Puppetmaster's regime is, like, definitely a B-tier story for me. It's just the parts 2 and 3 drag it down so much, so I cannot abide it up there. It must be in the C tier for me. The reason I would put it above Russian Sleep Experiment is just because of the first part of this story, which I think is really good, versus the Russian Sleep Experiment, which I think is very tepid throughout. Even though, like, the idea of the Russian Sleep Experiment is interesting, and I think the way that it exists, maybe it's not a good way to describe it, but, like, the version of the Russian Sleep Experiment that exists in the minds, the collective consciousness of a lot of the people like myself that read it when we were younger, is like an A-tier story, but the way that it's actually written is not. So it could use a really good rewrite. Next up, Magic 8-Ball story. Yes. This one's going up in the C tier. C tier for funny. So, like, it's probably not as funny as, like, the real Chuck E. Cheese, but I think the Magic 8-Ball story is so endearing. Weirdly enough, it was one of the 2 stories that I've covered that mentioned Barack Obama in them, so you gotta love that. But this one took place during, like, the 2008 or the 2012 election cycle, which is quite interesting. And we love a story that mentions Obama. So Magic 8-Ball is just, like, again, such an endearing story to me. Like, I love how at the end, the guy, it's like, starts out as, like, this creepy, like, oh, like, this Magic 8-Ball knows everything about you, and there's a scary thing that's stalking you. And then at the end, the guy finds a magic sword that he uses to cast holy light upon the creature that's fighting him. Then it has the best ending line of any story, where it says, like, the Magic 8-Ball answered with one word, of course, which is just absolute magic. That's definitely not one word. So yeah, this is another one that I have so much, like, I have such good vibes toward this, because I think this is, like, I don't even know how I found this story. But I definitely had read it, like, before I was even really making YouTube videos, I think. I don't know why I found this, but it must have just been on Reddit or something. Somebody mentioned it, but I feel like I was able to introduce this story to a lot of people, and that's kind of some of my favorite videos, the ones where I'm making it about something that's a lot less known, so that way I can kind of introduce it to more people. I think that's always fun, and it was fun to do that with, like, a funny story, because again, I just think this one's not very well known. So yeah, awesome story, such good vibes about it, but obviously not very well written, so it's in low C tier, but again, very funny. You know, I'll put this one above Tommy Taffy. I don't have the best memories of Tommy Taffy. I can't see why anybody would. Okay, next up we have Penpal. Another controversial, because I think you guys would expect me to put this in S tier. It's going to go in A tier. Above left-right game feels like a good spot for me. Again, I really like the left-right game, but Penpal's vibes I love a lot more. Penpal's its biggest issue, and I need to stop talking about this, but it is a no-sleep story, and so the ending suffers because of it, because the main character cannot be killed or abducted by the serial killer at the end of the story, which I think would have been the best way to end it. As the story stands currently, it ends with the guy who has been stalking the main character his entire life. He's been obsessed with this kid, going so far as to, like, kill all of his friends. This weird stalker decides that he's now okay with stealing Josh, the main character's friend, instead of him, and he like dyes his hair and puts him in his old clothes. And I just think that switch up really damages the story. And again, I think if this was not a no sleep story, the author would have been able to commit to like, you know, actually having the main character die, or there being an ending where he didn't have to be the one writing the story onto Reddit, because you have to be doing that if you're a no sleep story. But I will say, so this author, I have not read the Penpal novel yet. I've heard decent things about it. I've not had super good luck reading novels that were termed from no sleep stories into like full novels. I guess We Used to Live Here was pretty good, but again, it felt like it did feel noticeable that it was being turned from a no sleep into a full novel. And so there was kind of that internet horror writing that was in there that's like just not quite up to snuff of the level of writing you typically expect from a horror novel. But I'm very excited to get that author's next novel, by the way, called The Caretaker. I pre-ordered it, so it should be here soon. But anyway, I was gonna say, I'm going on such bad tangents. The guy that wrote Penpal, Dathan Auerbach, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, wrote a novel called Bad Man that I really want to make a video about, but you guys should all read, because I think it's really good. People have not had like, it's not like the strongest reception to it, but I think, especially like for being an author that came from internet horror, I think Bad Man is written really well, with the exception of like the prologue. Feels like it was written at a different time. I was nervous going in to the prologue because there were some weird issues I had with it, but the rest of the book I think is like really maturely written and like a super solid horror novel, and it's decently long. It was like 300 pages, I think, but I was like locked in the entire time. And like, even if I didn't love some of the decisions the book made, I just thought it was like incredibly solid. And it's hard because Penpal is so iconic. I don't know if I love the story of Batman as much as I like Penpal, but had very similar vibes. And yeah, I really love that story. So Penpal is important to me because I think it was, you know, kind of one of the very first internet horror stories that I read and like went back to when I was a little bit older and realized that like, oh, internet horror is actually good. Like there are people out here who are writing really good stories. And this one also really creeped me out in a way that a lot of previous stories hadn't creeped me out. It creeped me out in like a more human way, you know, especially because I've mentioned this before, but I grew up in Washington. I grew up in Vancouver, Washington. And like so many of my best friends and I would play in the woods a lot. And so like, this is just, it's such an easy story to imagine taking place in Washington. Whenever I'm reading a story, I always picture it taking place where I grew up for the most part. So yeah, I love the vibes in Penpal. Again, the only reason it's not in S tier is because of like the ending, which I have some issues with. Okay, next up we have Eyeless Jack. Oh my goodness. This one is probably just underneath the real Chuck E. Cheese. Eyeless Jack is really funny. I love my headcanon about the doctor. Again, I'm sounding so egotistical. I love my headcanon. No, I do love imagining the idea of the doctor being Eyeless Jack, and he's the one. That's why he's like not reacting at all to the fact that the main character has had like his kidneys, he's removed, his organs are being removed by Eyeless Jack. Such a funny story. Again, just like one of those ones where it's like somebody sees a scary image, like I have to write a story about this, and I must do it within the next hour and not revise this at all, or else, you know, I'm not going to get that sweet internet credit, which the person was writing this back in like 2010s. They probably weren't going to make any money off this anyway. But yeah, so funny. Like I think the doctor says something like, "I'm sorry, but it appears your kidneys are missing," which is just insane. Very funny story. And Eyeless Jack is iconic. And the image is also funny to me. So yeah, good. You do not recognize the bodies in the water. Whoop. This one's S tier. 2 SCPs in S tier, both written by DJ Cactus. Below This Thing of Quiet Madness, man, because that one's perfect. This thing, You Do Not Recognize the Bodies in the Water is almost perfect to me. Pretty much perfect. Like, you know, for all intents and purposes, it is. Such a creepy story. So, you know, the perfect distillation of these kind of SCPs where you're being drawn into something. A great part of the Class of 76 canon. Whenever I think of the Class of 76, this is the story that I always picture. The imagery of these bizarre floating bodies and you being pulled down in the water. There's a great moment where a guy, his log, it's the, there's a log of a guy who's going after these bodies, and he dives into the water. They go swimming after them, and he mentions like he all of a sudden remembers that he doesn't know how to swim. And I think when I was making my video on this, I interpreted it as like, oh, the body's got him to dive into the water even though he can't swim. But people pointed out that chances are this person does know how to swim, but the bodies are essentially implanting the memory of him being unable to swim into his mind, so he drowns, which is so cool. This story also does a great thing where it feels like it's done after like 10 minutes, which I think I did in my video, and then there's like a secret extra part to the story you can find that like, has these really great moments where the story itself is being corrupted. Such a great example of like a mimetic horror story. Again, I love SCPs and I love what DJ Cactus writes. That's going up there. Again, if you have not read these or watched my videos on them, please go read them because they're awesome. And I can't really spoil anything for you because they don't really have spoilers because they're kind of unexplained. But yeah, great stories. Next up, we have Borrasca. This one is probably a high B tier for me. It's definitely not A tier. Like I've said with so many of these, my issue with Borrasca is the ending. Not because I think the ending is gratuitous or too extreme, but again, I do think Borrasca and Tommy Taffy, in terms of their gratuity, are kind of on the same level, even though it feels like oftentimes they're not considered like that. My issue with Borrasca is I think it's not an issue. I think it's well written, and this is only the first 4 parts of it. I read the 5th part way long ago, but I need to go back and read it and decide if I want to make a video on it. But the first 4 parts, they set up a really interesting mystery, and I just don't know if the payoff is necessarily there. It is incredibly shocking, and it doesn't 100% feel like it's just trying to go for shock value, but it's the presentation of the ending where you find out that it's like this big human trafficking ring where they are like forcibly impregnating young women. It's like the most terrible thing you could ever imagine. But the way that like Jimmy Prescott, who is like the mayor of the town, I don't think he's the mayor, but he like owns a lot of stuff in the town. He's like the old money in the town. The way that he like talks to the main character and goes on like this James Bond style monologue just does not land for me at all, especially considering just how grounded the rest of it was. And I think some of the payoffs of the mystery aren't super great in the sense of like, they have like the whole skinned men thing and the triple tree, and like it just feels like a lot of it was set up and didn't know what it was going to pay off, and so they kind of put in all of these explanations at the end that do work but don't feel as satisfying as they could be. And that's just the story being a victim of how well it's all set up, but that's why it's not an A tier for me. But I do think like the atmosphere of the story is really, really good. But yeah, so I think high B tier. Feels B for Borrasca, feels good to me. But I still need to read the part 5. My issue, or like my worry with part 5 is, again, I feel like the story wraps everything up at the end and then is like, oh, here's a 5th part, and like since you've already delivered on all of these mysteries, then what are you gonna do for the next part? Because you don't really have mysteries to solve. Also, the other issue that I have with Borrasca is I don't think the ending makes any sense. I think the explanation, and I don't like how it's all explained in one letter you get at the very end. Like, I think there should have been more explanation spread throughout. But anyway, I don't understand like the mindset of like how this entire town is okay with what they're doing, and like that it's done because there's an issue with the water supply that I guess hasn't been resolved. But then there are these teenage girls that have grown up in the town that has had this fertility issue with their water supply who are able to get pregnant. So they must have solved it at some point. It's just like, and then they say they're just doing it for money, but I don't know. The ending feels so messy to me for a story that feels very tight up until then. So that's my issue with Borrasca. But nevertheless, I do think it's really, really well written. So high B tier. We're getting to the end here when we have one little line down here. Next up, we have It Wasn't There. This is another SCP. B tier for me. Maybe. Oops, what happened? Did it get dropped somewhere? Oh, I don't know what happened. I don't know where it ended up. But anyway, this one's going to go in the B tier for... Oh, it went to C. Okay, here we go. B tier. I probably like this more than 1999. Another good SCP written by DJ Cactus. Not quite up to this level, of course, but really interesting, has some really interesting things to say about, like, you know, it has this family where it seems like they have this, I think it's like an attic that they're unable to access, but they're drawn to at certain times. And there are all these different, you know, ideas like what could have happened up there. There's a daughter they had, like a teenage daughter who seemingly ran away from home or was being abused by her parents. And so the story has lots of themes of like parental abuse and like parental estrangement, and like is saying a lot of really interesting things. It's definitely has a lot more up to the left to your interpretation than these two stories up here, which is like maybe why I put it at B. It's like a little too abstract for me, but again, incredibly solid. And I think it was written before these two were, so that makes sense that the author would have improved over time. But still really cool and interesting. Yeah, a really cool story. This is also the very funny story with this video is when I posted it, I forgot to change the title name. Like when you drop a video into YouTube, the title name is just the title of the file that you've submitted, and I typically just put whatever title in. So then I just put it wasn't there, and I just forgot to change it. And then with the thumbnail, I accidentally cropped it wrong. So there's just like I think like a white strip on the end that's just like the edge of my blank Canva page. I just didn't crop it properly. I didn't drag the image out all the way. And so all these things went wrong when I uploaded it, but the video did well at the time. So it was like, sometimes you put all this effort into a video or you put all this effort into a thumbnail and it doesn't perform well at all. And then you have a thumbnail that's like literally poorly formatted and it does really well. There's some thumbnails that I made that I put a lot of effort into that just didn't do well. And that's why I kind of stopped putting a lot of effort into. But if you want to know my two favorite thumbnails, I really like maybe three. I mean, I really like way back I made a video about the book Ring, and I liked that one because it was like a well that you were looking up to with an eye at the end, and like I thought that was kind of interesting. I really like my Penpal thumbnail, which is like a bunch of Polaroids and images in them. I just think it had too much going on, and that's why it didn't perform very well as far as thumbnails go. And then I really like there's one the video is called Solving the Disappearance of Devil's Rock, which is a Paul Tremblay book that I covered. And the thumbnail for that one is like similar to the Borrasca one, where it's like, I think it might even, it's like notes that spell out like, where is Tommy? And put a lot of effort into that one too, and it didn't do very well. But I really like those thumbnails. I like putting effort into those, but to be quite honest with you guys, a lot of times whenever I finish a video, I'll record it, and then maybe the next day I'll edit the entire thing. And by the time that thing is ready to upload, I'm just like, so done with the video. I'm like, I just want to get this out. I just want to be done with this and move on to the next one. That the thumbnail is always the last thing I do, so they're always kind of low effort. Next up we have Dead Bart. Goodness. D tier for sure. Maybe a low D tier. Better than Homicidal Liu. Maybe a little bit better than Squidward's Suicide. A bit more funny than Squidward's Suicide, but I don't know. There's just not too many interesting things going on here. Not too many fun things. I do like the idea of Matt Groening being like this insane, creepy person who, like, if you ask him about this episode, he freaks out on you, which is very funny to me. My wife and I have been watching a ton of The Simpsons lately, so I've got a lot of good vibes from The Simpsons. But it's interesting. Like, even though I'm a huge fan, it's like this story doesn't really do it for me, but it does have some funny moments in it. Also, I think there's a lot of people, because the video is called Dead Bort, and there are a lot of people who are like, oh, you should never change the title even though you made a mistake. I do want to say that calling it Dead Bort was intentional. There's an episode where they go to Itchy and Scratchy Land, and Bart is looking for a novelty license plate that says Bart on it, but he can only find one that says Bort on it. And he's like, dang it, they only have Bort. And there's like a person who walks by and he's like, oh, were you talking to me? My name's Bort. And the other person's like, I thought you were talking to my son, who was also named Bort. So I call it Dead Bort for a reason, because that's one of my favorite Simpsons jokes. I think it was also International Simpsons Day, I think on Sunday. So hope you watched an episode. If you didn't, then, well, you're a fake fan. Okay, next up, Class of 76 is an A tier. Above Candle Cove. Another SCP. Comes from the Class of 76 SCP, if you can believe it. This one's weird because it kind of sets up a greater universe, but like, and the object itself, I believe, is like this haunted yearbook. Some really cool imagery of like photos in the yearbook that have like their faces distorted, and I think it's done in a way that's legitimately creepy, even though like distorted Germa sus face is kind of a trope now, like, you know, a cliche. But I really like Class of 76. And again, I think what it gave us is much more important. Like, it gave us a lot of these other SCPs. But I do think the story itself is fascinating. There's like this idea of you have this yearbook that is giving you fake memories again, where it's like people are writing in there and telling you about all these like experience that you had. There's a lot of really fun references about like somebody referencing like, remember when we did this over the summer, and it's something that happened in 1976. So without directly spelling it, it's like this clearly happened in the summer of 76, even though the person that's reading this would not have been alive during that time. And like it mentions like, we were so excited to go to to Disneyland for the opening of Space Mountain, which opened in 1976. I think Disneyland it opened, and Disney World it opened earlier, but it's way better in Disneyland too. But anyway, yeah, I really liked what this gave us. It was a really good creepypasta, not creepypasta, SCP. You can tell I'm getting tired here. Yeah, awesome. Okay, next up, This Is Where I Died. Another. Oh, I was blanking on this for a second. I got distracted because there's a dog outside. This is another S tier for me. Not as good as A Quiet Madness, but this feels like a good spot for it. Another SCP, this time not written by DJ Cactus, written by somebody else who commented on my videos and was super nice about the video that I made about it. This one also, I'm a little bit biased because my This Is Where I Died video is my favorite video I've ever made. I really love this video. If you don't know what this is, it is an SCP that is essentially a collection of stories that the SCP essentially are the stories, and as you read them, interesting things start to happen to you and to the people that read the stories. And then also it's like formatted in a way, again, the formatting is amazing. It's like this program that you're going through, and it has this picture of these candles, and it's like, I think it starts with maybe 8 candles, and as you read each story, a candle is extinguished, and then every story has like they're all different. They all play on different distinct common tropes in horror, but give them like unique spins, and then they all play on the numbers of candles that are left, maybe, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's like the number of candles that are still there, but they all have like things that line up with these numbers, and it's incredible work. When I made this video, the author of this, who authored most of the stories, I think there were some that were written by other authors, but they said they were grateful that I looked at the actual substance of the story versus just like the meta element of the story, which is also really cool. But this story, the stories themselves are really great. There's a really cool one where it's like it's found footage, like a found footage report of these people who have gone into, it's very like Resident Evil. I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil lately, but they go into this town that has all these crazy things happening, and it's like, it's really cool. All of these, you have these people that are dying, and like all of the horror is like religious in nature, that it's like these freaky versions of like biblical imagery, which I find super fascinating. And then like you have all these people that are dying, and they're all dying according to like the ways that Jesus was injured supposedly before the crucifixion. So like really cool implementations of things like that. There's also a really cool story, like one of the stories is about like all of the like it's sorry, I'm getting so distracted. It's a video game, and it's all of the ways that like this video game categorizes people. Like it's player based, and then like they all are about like every person that plays it has different things happen to them based on the type of person they are. It's so fascinating. Watch my video on it. It'll explain a lot more than I'm explaining here. But yeah, such a fun video to make, such a cool idea for a story and a collection of stories, and like the most inventive SCP I've ever read. Next up, Jeff the Killer. Oh, Jeff the Killer. If we were going pure funniness, this is an S tier story. We're not going pure funniness, but I'm still putting this one in the C tier. Maybe a bit too high for it, but just like, of all of these that I've covered, this is the funniest one. This is the funniest story. I'm honestly fine putting it at the very top of C tier. It could even, maybe on a different day I'd be putting it low B tier, but top of C tier feels like this is the funniest of the bad creepypastas. Everything about it is funny. It's never boring. It's like the perfect length. It feels so earnest in the way that was written, and it has spawned a crazy big fan base. And I just think like, and I love how the gulf in my mind of like how scary I remember this story being to how scary it actually is just, it's like there's this enormous divide between those two things. And that is just so endearing to me. And again, I have so much to owe to this story because it is my most viewed video, and I feel like I did a lot to make my channel, like, you know, bring in a lot more viewers. Before I was doing this, a lot of my most viewed videos were iceberg videos, doing Disturbing Books iceberg. And I liked making those videos, but I didn't really just want to be an iceberg channel, even though I was fine doing that if that's what I needed to do. And Jeff the Killer was like one of the first videos that I made, or like the first big video that I made where it was like, oh, I can make a video talking about one story and people will watch it and it'll do really well. And then also when I came up with like the first thing I thought of with this video was the title. The very first thing I even got was, I just thought it'd be funny to make a video called The Literary Analysis of Jeff the Killer. And I think I may have overused that title, but that I just thought it'd be funny because of the reputation the story has. I have to give credit to Jenny Nicholson for like reintroducing me to how bad this story was, and like her video about it cracks me up. And then I think Creepcast's first episode was Jeff the Killer, and that always cracks me up too. But such an iconic story, so awesome. Here I am praising this story so much, I'm praising it so hard that I'm putting it in the C tier, but you guys know what I mean. Obviously not well written, but you know, so funny and just amazing for that sense. Okay, The Tall Dog. This is, I think it's maybe the only one here that's from like a multi-pack video. This is an Elias Witherow story. For me, this is, I think, low B tier. Probably lowest B tier. This is written by the same guy who wrote Tommy Taffy. Very solid story though. About a guy whose wife dies, then his daughter talks about this strange dog that comes in the night, and like essentially the ending is incredibly haunting. It's like the dog drives his daughter crazy, and she like has the mind of a dog, and this freaky tall dog entity like steals his daughter's soul. It's so depressing, but the imagery of it is really cool. And the parts of the story I don't like, or like, I think it's maybe like melodramatic, feels rough to be saying about a guy who lost his wife and his daughter, but like a little bit too like trying to hit you over the top with how like depressing the situation is at the beginning, when I think the audience would have understood how depressing it is just by virtue of it being, you know, it being a horrifying situation of losing your wife and your daughter. But really good story. I think way better than Tommy Taffy, and it showed me that, because I was kind of ready to dismiss Elias Witherow as just like a guy who writes shocking stories for the sake of being edgy, but The Tall Dog was kind of what proved me wrong, in the sense of like, no, this is actually a very talented author who can write really cool stories. Again, I just think Tommy Taffy it just got popular, so he kept writing stories about him. So yeah, Tall Dog is a good story. I think B tier feels safe for it. And last, Tapers. This is, I think I'm gonna say low S tier. Yeah. Tapers, I have a really long video on this one as well. This is a story, like a multi-part story written by, oh, come on, what's his name? The guy, Tony Domenico, the guy that made Petscop, which is my favorite internet horror, like series, like YouTube series of all time. I do want to make a video on that. I've tried making a video on it several times, but I have a hard time wrapping my mind around what I even want to say about it. I've got some interesting ideas about it. Petscop is literal perfection. I think it's perfect. I think it's like the creepiest thing ever, and it's amazing. Tapers is kind of the predecessor to Petscop. So if you're interested in Petscop, you haven't watched my video on Tapers, you should watch it. I read through the entire thing and I give my thoughts on it. Tapers is like so as its predecessor. It is about a girl named Care, who has a very uncaring mother, who is kidnapped by a creepy guy named Marvin, and then on the side you have a guy who's obsessed with going into a store that rents out video cameras that's called Tapers. And he's just like, I love stories that have very concerning protagonists that are really eerie and creepy, and that's like all this story is. The story is all very abstract. It feels like you can never quite get a hold of what exactly is happening, but you know enough to be scared and be frightened for Care as a character. If you know about Petscop and you know nothing about Tapers, you're probably saying like, what? Like that sounds just like Petscop. It is very similar to Petscop, even though it seems like a lot of the Petscop community wants to completely dismiss Tapers and say that there's zero connection between them. I don't think they're directly related, and I don't think you should say that like Tapers and Petscop take place in the same universe, but it was very clear that the author was thinking of Tapers when he made Petscop. So I just think if you want to know more about, if you're interested in like diving into Petscop and you've already read all the lore documents about it and you've watched the series a bunch of times, definitely read Tapers if you haven't, because it's just really good either way. But S tier for me, just because of how unique and creepy it is and how well written the whole thing is. Again, it's just, it all feels very unsettling and uneasy in a way that I think is hard to write. And I just think it's incredibly impressive that Tony Domenico was able to write a story like that. And it's 10 times more impressive that he was able to translate that same uneasy feeling that you get when you're reading Tapers and turn it into a YouTube series like Petscop. I just think it's absolutely genius. The best way I can describe it, if I'm ever going to make a Petscop video, I will use the same analogy, but people have made images that are supposed to simulate what it feels like when you have a stroke. So it's like, you look at this image and your mind can kind of make sense of everything, but it can't really put the pieces together. Everything feels like it should be something, but then you look at it more closely and it's not what it looked like originally. And those images are incredibly distressing to me because my mind is trying to make sense of this visual information that feels like it should be cohesive, but it's not. But so that's what my mind is like. It's eerie. Like it makes me creeped out when I see an image like that. Petscop is like the long form visual representation of that, where it's like the more you think about Petscop and try to make sense of it, the more it doesn't make sense, but there is enough there to feel like there is a story that wants to be told. It's so good. It feels so haunted and cursed, and it's, yeah, just one of like the best works of horror I have ever seen, and everybody should go watch that if you haven't yet. It's incredible. But yeah, I think this is gonna be my tier list for today. This video is only an hour and a half long. If you watch this whole thing, seriously, thank you guys. Props to you guys. I'm sure this will not be a very popular video of mine. I know it was very ranty. I probably said a lot of, similar things over and over again, but I did want to make a video like this because I do think it's fun to revisit a lot of these and see where I think they rank in my, just in my mind. Hopefully I was able to give some more insight into like why I like certain stories and why I might dislike some of them. And like, I just think it was fun to go back and revisit a lot of these and maybe some insight into how I make my videos. But yeah, definitely these four up top are just like absolute perfection to me, with them all being some of my favorite videos I've ever made, especially This Is Where I Died. I had so much fun making that video. And yeah, I guess if I were to put there's some other stories that I'm thinking about, like if I were to put Who Was Phone on here, that would obviously be an S tier. But yeah, I think I feel, good about everything else. So thank you guys so much for watching this very long video. Sorry again if I was just so rambly. It's probably kind of jarring to hear me talk, not when I'm, scripted or editing things together, which I do, in all my other videos. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you disagree with me on some of these. If you have stories that you wanted me to cover that I didn't cover, you could put where you think I would put them in my rankings down below. And if you guess them, you'll get 100 gold coins to spend on the Davis Morgan store. And then, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.